The rain hammered against the windows of the small Brooklyn cafe like bullets against bulletproof glass. Elena Martinez sat in the corner booth, her fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Outside, the October wind rattled the fire escapes and sent newspapers tumbling down Atlantic Avenue like urban tumbleweeds. She'd chosen this place deliberately, far enough from her Upper East Side apartment that no one she knew would see her, close enough to the clinic that she could walk there without thinking too much. The envelope in her purse felt heavier than it should. Medical records, test results. The final confirmation of what 3 doctors had already told her. Her body would never carry a child. "You want a refill, hon?" The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and tired feet, gestured at Elena's cup. "No, thank you." Elena's voice came out smaller than she intended. At 32, she'd imagined her life differently. A brownstone in Park Slope, maybe. A husband who kissed her goodbye before work. Sunday mornings spent making pancakes while small feet pattered on hardwood floors. Instead, she had a successful career as an art restoration specialist, an empty apartment, and the echo of her ex-fiancé's words still ringing in her ears. "I want a family, Elena. A real family." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through Instagram without really seeing it. Baby announcements, gender reveals, her college roommate's 3rd child. She closed the app and stared at her reflection in the darkened screen instead. "Miss Martinez." Elena looked up. A man in an expensive charcoal suit stood beside her table, rain beading on his shoulders, despite the umbrella he carried. He was perhaps 45, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. Something about him made Elena sit up straighter, an instinctive reaction to the quiet authority he carried like a second skin. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Not yet." He extended his hand. "Vincent Romano. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. Maria Russo at the Metropolitan Museum." Elena shook his hand carefully. Maria was her supervisor, a woman who'd mentored her for 5 years. "Maria sent you?" "In a manner of speaking. May I sit?" She nodded, curious despite herself. Vincent settled into the booth with the careful precision of someone always aware of exits and sightlines. Up close, she noticed the fine tailoring of his suit, the platinum watch, the ring on his right hand bearing a crest she didn't recognize. "Maria mentioned you specialize in Renaissance paintings," Vincent said. "Restoration work, authentication." "That's right." Elena's professional instincts kicked in, pushing aside her personal turmoil. "Are you a collector?" "You could say that." A slight smile touched his lips. "I recently acquired several pieces at auction. 17th century Italian works. They're damaged. I need someone discreet, someone talented. Maria suggested you." Eleanor studied him more carefully. His accent was pure New York, but there was something old world about his mannerisms, the way he folded his hands, the measured way he spoke. And there was something else, an undercurrent of danger that most people probably missed, but that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "I'm expensive," she said flatly. "Money isn't an issue. And discretion means? It means the paintings stay in my private collection. No museum cataloging, no insurance records, no questions about provenance." He leaned back. "I acquired them legally, Miss Martinez, but I value my privacy." Every instinct told her to refuse. There were red flags here, big, waving crimson banners. But Elena thought about her empty apartment, the medical bills piling up from fertility treatments that had failed, the need to do something other than sit in cafes mourning a future that would never exist. "When would you want me to start?" "Tonight, if possible. I'll have my driver take you to the house. You can assess the work, we'll discuss terms." He pulled out a business card. Simple, elegant, just a name and phone number. "If you're not comfortable with the arrangement after seeing the pieces, I'll pay you for your time and we'll part ways." "Fair." Eleanor picked up the card. Vincent Romano. No company name, no address. Just 10 digits, and a name that sounded like it belonged in a different century. "Fair," she heard herself say. 2 hours later, Elena sat in the back of a black Mercedes, watching Brooklyn give way to Queens, and then to the less manicured neighborhoods of the outer boroughs. The driver, a young man who'd introduced himself only as Marco, hadn't spoken since opening her door. Rain continued to sheet against the windows, turning the city into a watercolor painting. They pulled up to a house that made Elena reconsider everything. It wasn't what she'd expected. Not some gaudy mansion, but a solid brick townhouse in a quiet residential area, the kind of place where families raised children and elderly men played bocce ball in the park. Warm light glowed from the windows, and she could see the shadow of someone moving behind the curtains. "Miss Martinez." Marco opened her door with an umbrella already deployed. "This way." The entrance hall took her breath away. Original molding, restored to perfection. Marble floors that gleamed under antique light fixtures, and on the walls, paintings, dozens of them. Some she recognized immediately. A minor Caravaggio, what looked like an early Artemisia Gentileschi, a stunning Bernini sketch. "Holy shit," she breathed. "Mr. Romano will be pleased you appreciate his collection." Vincent's voice came from the staircase. He'd changed into more casual clothes, dark jeans, a black Henley, but somehow looked even more imposing without the suit's civilizing influence. "The pieces I need you to examine are upstairs in my study." Eleanor followed him up the curved staircase, her trained eye cataloguing every painting they passed. Each one was worth hundreds of thousands, some millions. This wasn't just a collection, it was a museum-quality assemblage of Italian Baroque and Renaissance art. The study was wood-paneled and book-lined, smelling of leather and old paper and something else, gun oil maybe. Vincent gestured to a large table where 3 paintings lay carefully arranged. Elena forgot everything else. The first was a Madonna and Child, the paint cracked and flaking, but the underlying genius unmistakable. Late 16th century, possibly Venetian school. The second showed the martyrdom of a saint, dark and violent and breathtaking. The third, "This is a Bronzino," she whispered, moving closer. "Or a very, very good copy. It's authentic. All 3 are. They were stored improperly for decades." Vincent poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "Can you restore them?" Eleanor circled the table slowly, her fingers hovering over the damaged surfaces without quite touching. Years of training allowed her to see past the damage to the masterpieces beneath. The Madonna alone was worth a fortune. The Bronzino, if it was real, was priceless. "It'll take months, maybe a year for all 3. The Madonna needs complete structural stabilization. The canvas is separating from the stretcher. And this," she gestured to the martyrdom scene, "the varnish has oxidized badly. I'll need to remove it completely and revarnish. It's delicate work." "I have time." Vincent sipped his drink. "And I'll provide whatever materials you need. You can work here. I have a room with north-facing windows, perfect light. Or you can transport them to your own studio if you prefer. Here would be better. Moving them in this condition is risky." Eleanor pulled out her phone, taking photos from multiple angles. "I'll need to test the pigments, verify the underlying drawing." A door slammed somewhere in the house. Footsteps thundered on the stairs, accompanied by raised voices. "Vincent! Vincent!" A young man burst into the study, wild-eyed and bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow. He was maybe 19, dressed in street clothes spattered with rain and something darker. He stopped short when he saw Elena. "Shit, sorry, I didn't know." "Tommy." Vincent's voice could have cut glass. "What happened?" "The Bonetti crew jumped us outside Sal's place. They were waiting. Joey's in the car. He took one in the shoulder. But he's okay. Get Joey to Dr. Castellano. Now. Marco will drive you." Vincent's expression never changed, but something in the air shifted. The urbane art collector vanished, replaced by something harder, colder. "We'll discuss this later. Go." Tommy nodded and disappeared. Eleanor heard more footsteps, urgent voices, a car starting outside. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. "I should explain," Vincent said finally, turning to face her. His eyes, she noticed, were the color of winter sky before snow. "You're Mafia." Eleanor's voice was steady, which surprised her. "That's what the discretion is about. I prefer to think of myself as a businessman with traditional values." He set down his drink. "But yes, if that makes you uncomfortable, Marco will drive you home. I'll still pay you for your time." Elena looked at the paintings, at the Bronzino with its luminous flesh tones and heartbreaking beauty, at the Madonna whose serene face had survived centuries only to be nearly destroyed by neglect. At the chance to do work that mattered, work that would save something irreplaceable. She thought about her empty apartment, the medical records in her purse, the future that wasn't coming. "I'll need a $50,000 advance," she said, "and complete access to the paintings for authentication purposes. If any of these are stolen, I walk, immediately." Vincent studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile this time. Warm and surprisingly genuine. "You have a deal, Miss Martinez. Welcome to the family." The word family hung in the air like a promise or a threat. Elena wasn't sure which. Outside, thunder rolled across the Queen's skyline, and somewhere in the house, someone was making phone calls in rapid Italian. She'd stepped into a world she didn't understand, for reasons she couldn't quite articulate, but as she looked at the damaged paintings, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. So even if it came wrapped in blood and secrets. 3 weeks into the restoration work, Elena had established a routine that felt almost normal. She arrived at Vincent's townhouse every morning at 9, was greeted by Marco or one of the other young men who seemed to drift through the house at all hours, and spent 8 to 10 hours in what Vincent called the restoration room, a converted bedroom with perfect northern light and custom-built work tables. The Madonna was proving even more challenging than she'd anticipated. The canvas had been relined at some point in the early 20th century, but badly, with too much adhesive that had now turned brown and brittle. She worked painstakingly, removing the old lining thread by thread under magnification, her hands steady despite the knowledge that one slip could destroy a 400-year-old masterpiece. Vincent checked on her progress daily, usually around noon. He'd appear with coffee, always prepared exactly as she liked it, which meant someone had been paying attention, and they'd discuss the work. He knew more about art history than most collectors she'd met, and their conversations ranged from technical discussions of Renaissance painting techniques to debates about attribution and provenance. He never mentioned the business that occasionally interrupted those conversations. The phone calls taken in rapid Italian. The young men who appeared with injuries or urgent messages. The nights when she worked late and heard raised voices from Vincent's study, discussing things she deliberately didn't try to understand. It was easier that way. To exist in the small, controlled world of pigment and canvas and chemical analysis, and ignore the larger, darker world that surrounded it. On a Friday afternoon in November, Elena was carefully removing oxidized varnish from the Bronzino when she heard footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets moving quickly. She looked up as Vincent entered with 3 young men she'd seen around the house before. "Elena, I'd like you to meet some people." Vincent gestured to the tallest of the 3, a lean kid with sharp cheekbones and watchful eyes. "This is Danny Marchetti. Danny, Miss Martinez is restoring the paintings I told you about." "The Bronzino?" Danny moved closer, genuinely interested. "My mom used to take me to the Met every Sunday. I always loved the Renaissance stuff." "Used to?" Elena asked gently. "She died when I was 12. Danny's voice was matter-of-fact, but Elena saw Vincent's hand briefly touch the young man's shoulder. "Vincent took me in after. Gave me a job, a place to live, made sure I finished school." Elena looked at Vincent with new understanding. "You raised him. Him and about a dozen others over the years." Vincent's expression was unreadable. "I find that young men without families often need direction. Purpose. I provide that." The second young man, stocky with a boxer's build, extended his hand. "Michael Russo. Maria at the Met. That's my aunt. She said you're the best at what you do." "Your aunt exaggerates," Elena said, shaking his hand, "but I'm good." The third was the kid from her first night, Tommy, now sporting a healing cut above his eyebrow. "Sorry about before, the whole blood and drama thing." "It's fine." Elena set down her tools, studying the 3 of them. They were all young, early 20s at most, but there was a hardness to them that spoke of difficult lives, and they all looked at Vincent with a mixture of respect, loyalty, and something that might have been love. "The guys wanted to see the paintings," Vincent explained. "I talk about them enough that they got curious. If you don't mind." "No, it's fine." Elena found herself smiling. "Come on, let me show you what I've been working on." She spent the next hour explaining the restoration process, surprised by their genuine interest. Danny had a good eye for composition. Michael asked intelligent questions about authentication. Even Tommy, who admitted he didn't know shit about art, was fascinated by the technical process of analyzing pigments. As they left, Elena heard Danny say to Vincent, "She's nice, different from the usual people, you know." "That's the point," Vincent replied quietly. That evening, Elena worked later than usual. The house had fallen quiet around 8, and she'd gotten absorbed in a particularly tricky section of the Madonna's face. The original underdrawing was coming to light as she removed the damaged varnish, revealing the artist's initial sketch beneath the final painting. It was like watching history reveal itself layer by layer. "You should eat something." Elena jumped, nearly dropping her scalpel. Vincent stood in the doorway holding 2 plates of food. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the room. "Jesus, you scared me." She set down her tools carefully. "What time is it?" "Almost 10. Maria, Michael's aunt, dropped off dinner earlier. She worries I don't eat properly." He set 1 plate on an empty work table. "Homemade lasagna, you should have some before it gets cold." Eleanor realized she was starving. She hadn't eaten since a granola bar at lunch. "You're not going to poison me for knowing too much, are you? If I was going to kill you, Miss Martinez, I'd have done it weeks ago." Vincent's tone was dry. "And I wouldn't waste Maria's lasagna in the process." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, and Elena could hear the distant sound of traffic on Queens Boulevard. "Why did you really hire me?" she asked finally. "You could have found someone through legitimate channels, someone who wouldn't ask questions." Vincent set down his fork. "Because Maria said you were brilliant, because I could see from your work at the Met that you care about preservation, not profit, and because—" he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because you looked like someone who understood that sometimes the world breaks things, and all we can do is try to put them back together again." Elena thought about the envelope in her purse that first day, the medical records, the broken future. "That's surprisingly perceptive for a first meeting. I'm good at reading people. It's kept me alive this long." He stood carrying their empty plates. "Get some rest, Elena. The Madonna will still be there tomorrow." "Vincent," she stopped him at the door. "Those kids, Danny, Michael, Tommy, you really raised them. Some of them. Others I just redirected when they were heading down bad paths, gave them options their circumstances didn't provide." He leaned against the doorframe. "My father brought me into this life when I was 15. I never had a choice. I try to give young men choices, even if all those choices exist within a world I can't leave. That's almost noble, for a Mafia boss." He smiled faintly. "I'm many things, Elena, but I try not to be a hypocrite. These kids needed a father figure. I needed something to care about beyond business and survival. We help each other." After he left, Elena stood at the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. 2 houses down, she could see a family through their window, a mother and father and 2 small children, decorating for Thanksgiving. The scene was so normal, so domestic, it made her chest ache. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a contact she'd been avoiding for weeks. Her sister, Rachel, who had 3 kids and a perfect life in Connecticut. The last message was a photo of Rachel's youngest, a toddler covered in finger paint. The caption, "Messy, but worth it. When are you coming to visit? The kids miss their aunt." Eleanor closed the message without responding. She couldn't explain why it hurt to see those photos, why the invitation felt like salt in a wound that wouldn't heal. Turning back to the Madonna, she studied the serene face emerging from centuries of damage and neglect. The artist had painted her with such tenderness, such love, a mother and child, frozen in eternal grace. Elena picked up her tools and went back to work. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, just before Thanksgiving. Elena was working on the martyrdom scene when Vincent appeared with an envelope. His expression was grim, and she knew immediately something had changed. "What's wrong?" "The Bronzino. I had it authenticated independently as per our agreement." He set down the envelope. "It's real. Agnolo Bronzino, circa 1545. Portrait of Eleonora di Toledo's lady-in-waiting. It disappeared from a private collection in Florence during World War II. You're telling me it's stolen? I'm telling you it was stolen 75 years ago. The family that owned it is gone. The estate was dissolved. There's no one to return it to." Vincent's voice was measured. "But I understand if this changes things for you." Eleanor opened the envelope, reading the authentication report. It was thorough, professional, damning. The painting was priceless, and legally speaking belonged to no one. "I should walk away," she said quietly. "Yes, you should. But if I do, what happens to it? You'll just store it somewhere, and in another 75 years, it'll be even more damaged. Maybe destroyed entirely." "Probably." Vincent moved to the window, looking out at the grey November sky. "That's the paradox of this world, Elena. Beautiful things get caught up in ugly circumstances. We do our best to preserve them, but sometimes our best isn't good enough." Eleanor thought about the past month, about Danny's genuine excitement when she'd shown him the underdrawing of the Madonna, about Michael bringing her coffee the way she liked it without being asked, about Tommy, who'd started checking out art books from the library and leaving them shyly on her work table. She thought about Vincent, who'd built a family out of broken boys and gave them something to believe in, even if that something was complicated and morally ambiguous. "I'll finish the restoration," she said finally. "All 3 pieces. But I have a condition." "Name it." "When they're done, you let people see them. Not in a museum, I understand that's not possible. But private viewings, art students, historians. You have this incredible collection hidden away. Let it serve a purpose beyond just being owned." Vincent turned from the window, studying her carefully. "You're asking me to open my home to strangers, to take security risks, to potentially expose my collection to legal scrutiny. I'm asking you to share something beautiful with people who'll appreciate it, to let these paintings be more than just trophies. And if I refuse, then I walk, and you find another restorer who won't ask questions." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "So your choice." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, a car alarm went off, then fell silent. Somewhere in the house, someone was practicing scales on a piano. Another layer of incongruity in this strange, contradictory world. 4 viewings a year, Vincent said finally. "Small groups carefully vetted, and you'll be here to supervise, to talk about the work. Deal?" "Deal." He extended his hand. When Elena shook it, she felt the calluses, the strength in his grip. The hands of a man who'd built an empire with violence, but who treasured art with the tenderness of a curator. "There's something else," Vincent said, releasing her hand. "Thanksgiving is Thursday. I'd like you to come to dinner. The whole family will be here. All the kids I've taken in over the years, plus Maria and a few others. It would be good for them to meet you properly. To understand that there are different kinds of strength, different ways to build a life." Elena started to refuse automatically, but she thought about her own Thanksgiving plans, heating up a frozen dinner in her empty apartment, ignoring her sister's calls, pretending the holiday didn't exist. "What time?" she heard herself ask. 3 o'clock. Don't bring anything except yourself." He smiled. "And be prepared for chaos." 15 people in one house, most of them with strong opinions and no concept of indoor voices. "It's loud." "Loud sounds good," Eleanor said, surprising herself. "Loud sounds really good." That night, as Eleanor packed up her tools, she found Vincent in his study, smoking a cigar and reading a leather-bound book that looked older than the country. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said from the doorway. "You've already agreed to have Thanksgiving with a crime family. Might as well ask personal questions." He set down the book. "What do you want to know? You never married? Never had children of your own?" Vincent's expression flickered with something, pain, regret, something raw, and quickly suppressed. "I was engaged once, 20 years ago. She was a teacher, completely outside this world. Sweet, innocent, the kind of woman who believed people were fundamentally good. What happened? She got caught in crossfire. Literally." His voice was flat, emotionless, in the way of people discussing old wounds that never quite healed. "A rival family targeted a restaurant where we were having dinner. She died. I survived. After that, I decided marriage wasn't for me. Too dangerous, too many vulnerabilities. But I still wanted something, a legacy beyond violence and money. So I started taking in kids who needed guidance. Gave them the family I'd never have biologically." Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest, the understanding that she and Vincent were mirrors of each other, both mourning futures that would never exist, both building alternative versions of the lives they'd imagined. "I can't have children," she said abruptly. The words came out before she could stop them, before she could question why she was telling him something she'd barely admitted to herself. Medical condition. Scarring from endometriosis. 3 different doctors confirmed it. "My body just doesn't work right." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Then he stubbed out his cigar and stood, moving to the window. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I'm sorry. That's a hard thing to carry. My fiancé left when he found out. Said he wanted a real family. Like I was defective, broken." The words tumbled out now. Months of pain finally finding release. "And maybe I am. Maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with me that I can't stop." Vincent turned to face her. "There is nothing wrong with you, Eleanor. Biology doesn't determine worth. A body's capabilities don't measure a soul's capacity for love or purpose or meaning. But I wanted," her voice cracked, "I wanted children, I wanted to be a mother, and now I never will be. No, you'll never be a biological mother. But that's one kind of motherhood, Eleanor. Not the only kind. He moved closer, his expression impossibly gentle for a man who commanded an empire built on violence. You think Danny doesn't look at you with admiration? That Tommy doesn't hang on your words when you explain Renaissance techniques? That Michael doesn't light up when you praise his eye for color? That's different, is it? I'm not their biological father, but I'm the only father most of them have known. I didn't give them life, but I gave them a life. Purpose. Direction. Love in my limited way. He paused. Family is what we build, Elena, not what biology dictates. Tears burned behind Elena's eyes. She blinked them back furiously, unwilling to cry in front of this man, who somehow understood her pain more deeply than anyone else ever had. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? Vincent gestured to encompass the house, the city beyond, the complicated web of relationships he'd built. We're all trying to create meaning from broken pieces, Elena. Your pieces are just different from mine. They stood in silence for a moment, two wounded people in a room full of shadows and old books and the lingering smell of cigar smoke. Thank you, Elena said finally. For what? For not saying it'll be okay. For not offering empty comfort. For just understanding. We're more alike than you think, Vincent said softly. We both spend our lives trying to restore things, to take what's damaged and make it whole again. Maybe we can't fix ourselves, but we can preserve beauty for others. That counts for something. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. As she left, she heard Vincent return to his reading, the gentle rustle of ancient pages the only sound in the quiet house. Walking to the subway, she'd started taking public transit instead of accepting Marco's offered rides. Needing the normalcy of anonymous commute, Elena thought about Vincent's words, about family being what you build, about restoration and repair, and the slow, patient work of making broken things whole. Her phone buzzed. Her sister. Please come for Thanksgiving. The kids really want to see you. I know things have been hard, but you're still part of this family. Eleanor stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed, I have other plans this year, but maybe Christmas, I'd like that. The response came immediately. Christmas is perfect. Love you, sis. Love you too, Eleanor wrote back, and for the first time in months, she meant it. On the subway home, surrounded by strangers and lost in her own thoughts, Elena didn't notice the man watching her from across the car. Didn't see him take a photo with his phone. Didn't hear him make a quiet call in accented English. If she had, she might have recognized the moment when her two worlds, art and violence, restoration and destruction, began their collision course. But she was too busy thinking about Thanksgiving dinner and the strange, complicated family she'd somehow joined. Too busy imagining a future that looked different from the one she'd mourned, but maybe, possibly just as meaningful. The train rattled through the tunnel toward Manhattan, carrying her home through the November darkness. Behind her, unseen, threats were gathering. But ahead, in Vincent Romano's townhouse in Queens, a family was preparing to welcome her home. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of November day that made New York feel almost optimistic. Elena stood outside Vincent's townhouse at exactly 3 o'clock, holding a bottle of wine despite his instructions not to bring anything. Old habits died hard, and showing up to dinner empty-handed felt wrong, family rules or not. The door opened before she could knock. Tommy grinned at her, wearing an apron that said "Kiss the Cook," and sporting what looked like flour in his hair. "Miss Martinez, you came." He pulled her inside with easy familiarity. Vincent's in the kitchen having a meltdown about the turkey. Maria's yelling at him in Italian. Michael's hiding in the living room. It's chaos. Come on. The house had transformed since Elena's last visit. The formal elegance she'd grown accustomed to had given way to cheerful disorder. A long table dominated the dining room, already set for what looked like 20 people. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator in the visible kitchen. Music played from somewhere upstairs, something Italian and operatic that clashed beautifully with the hip-hop thumping from another room. "Elena!" Maria Russo emerged from the kitchen, pulling her into a hug that smelled like garlic and wine. "Thank God you're here. Tell Vincent the turkey isn't ruined. He thinks because it's a little brown on one side. It's burnt, Maria. Burnt and dry and—" Vincent appeared behind her, wearing jeans and a dark blue sweater that made his eyes look even more intense. He stopped when he saw Eleanor. "You came. You invited me. I know, He smiled, softer than she'd ever seen him. I'm glad you're here. Come in, meet everyone. The next hour was a whirlwind of introductions. Danny was there with a girlfriend, a pre-med student named Sophia who looked terrified until Eleanor started talking to her about art history. Michael had brought 3 younger kids who called him Uncle Mike and ran through the house like small tornadoes. Tommy's younger brother, Anthony, had just gotten out of juvenile detention and stuck close to Vincent like a shadow. There were others too. A man named Sal who'd known Vincent's father and told elaborate stories about the old days. 2 women Vincent introduced as family friends, Angela and Rosa, who ran a bakery in Bensonhurst and brought enough cannoli to feed an army. A young couple, Marco and his wife Lucia, who were expecting their first child. 15 people, Vincent murmured to Elena as they watched the controlled chaos of pre-dinner preparations. I told you it was loud. You undersold it. Elena accepted a glass of wine from Danny. It's beautiful. It's insane. That too. Dinner was served at 4, after much yelling, laughter, and near disaster, when Anthony almost dropped the sweet potatoes. Elena found herself seated between Vincent and Sophia, directly across from Maria, who kept giving her knowing looks that Elena chose to ignore. Vincent stood at the head of the table, raising his glass. The room fell silent immediately, a testament to the authority he commanded even in domestic settings. Every year we do this, he began, and every year I say the same thing. We're not related by blood. Most of us came from broken places, broken families, broken circumstances. But we're here now, together, and that makes us family in the way that matters most. Hear, hear. Sal raised his glass enthusiastically. This year, I want to introduce someone new. Vincent gestured to Elena. Elena Martinez is restoring some paintings for me, but more than that, she's reminded me why we preserve beautiful things, why we fight to save what's damaged. He paused, seeming to search for words. She's family now, if she wants to be. Every eye turned to Eleanor. She felt her face flush, felt the weight of expectation and welcome in equal measure. Her voice came out scratchy. She cleared her throat and tried again. I didn't expect to find family this year. I thought I'd lost that possibility, but you've all welcomed me and I'm grateful. So yes, if you'll have me, I'd like to be part of this family. The cheer that went up was genuine and loud. Tommy whistled. Maria dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Sophia squeezed Elena's hand under the table. And Vincent looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe, or relief, or something more complicated that she wasn't ready to name. The meal was extraordinary. Turkey that was actually perfect despite Vincent's worries. Maria's lasagna because apparently no Italian Thanksgiving was complete without pasta. Sweet potatoes with marshmallows that the kids devoured. Stuffing that Sal claimed was his grandmother's recipe, but that Maria insisted came from a box. Eleanor found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, maybe years. She told Sophia about restoration techniques and listened to Marco talk about his job as a mechanic. She played a card game with the younger kids that devolved into cheerful chaos. She helped Maria in the kitchen and received whispered warnings about that Vincent. He seems tough, but he's soft inside. Be gentle with him. We're not, Elena started. Not yet, Maria said knowingly. But you will be. I see how he looks at you, like you're one of his paintings, something precious that needs protecting. I don't need protecting. Everyone needs protecting, Cara. Even strong women. Especially strong women. Maria handed her a stack of plates. Now take these to the dining room before the children eat the tablecloth. As evening fell, the crowd thinned. The younger kids went home with their parents. Sal left with Angela and Rosa, arguing cheerfully about the best route back to Brooklyn. Sophia kissed Danny goodbye, extracting a promise that he'd call her tomorrow. By 9 o'clock, only the core family remained. Eleanor, Vincent, Danny, Michael, Tommy, Anthony, and Marco. They'd moved to the living room, sprawled across couches and chairs in comfortable disarray. Best Thanksgiving ever, Anthony declared. He was 17, all sharp angles and defensive posture, but he'd relaxed over the course of the evening. Way better than juvie. That's a low bar, kid, Michael said, but his tone was gentle. Still counts. Anthony looked at Vincent. Thanks for, everything. You earned it by staying out of trouble. Vincent's voice was firm but kind. Keep it up. Stay in school. Stay away from the crew that got you arrested. You do that, and this is your home for as long as you need it. I will. I promise. Eleanor watched the exchange with growing understanding. This was what Vincent did. Not just taking in kids, but actively shaping their futures, giving them structure and boundaries and unconditional support. Being the father most of them had never had. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister. "How's your Thanksgiving? Kids want to FaceTime their cool aunt if you have a minute." Elena glanced at Vincent, who nodded permission. She stepped into the hallway and called Rachel. "Aunt Elena." 3 faces appeared on screen, her nieces and nephew crowding around the phone. "Happy Thanksgiving." "Happy Thanksgiving, monsters. Are you being good for your mom?" "Mostly," her oldest niece Emma said diplomatically. "We missed you today. Why didn't you come?" "I had other plans, sweetheart. But I'll see you at Christmas, okay?" "Promise?" "Promise." Rachel appeared behind the kids, shooing them away gently. "Hey, sis, you okay? You look different." "Good different." "I am okay. Better than okay, actually." Elena found herself smiling. "I met some people. Made some friends. It's been good. I'm glad. We've been worried about you." Rachel's expression turned serious. "After everything with Jason and the fertility stuff, we didn't know how to help." "You couldn't have helped. I had to figure it out myself. But I'm getting there." "Good. I love you, Elena. Don't be a stranger." "I won't. Love you too." When Elena returned to the living room, she found the mood had shifted. Vincent was on his phone, his expression dark. Danny and Michael had moved closer, their easy postures replaced by alert tension. "What's wrong?" Elena asked. Vincent looked up, and she saw anger in his eyes. Real anger, cold and controlled. "Do you remember taking the subway Tuesday night, after you left here?" "Yes." "Why?" "Someone was watching you, following you." He held up his phone, showing her a photo. It was her, sitting on the train, clearly unaware of being photographed. "The Benetti family. They've been watching my house, tracking everyone who comes and goes. They sent this to me an hour ago with a message. 'Nice friend you have. Be a shame if something happened to her.'" The bottom dropped out of Elena's stomach. "They're threatening me. They're threatening everyone connected to me. It's an intimidation tactic. They want me to know they can reach my people." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I won't let them touch you. Maybe I should stop coming here." "If I'm putting everyone at risk." "No." Vincent stood, moving to the window. "You stop coming, they win. They push us into fear and isolation, they win. We don't give them that power." "But Vincent..." "He's right," Danny interjected. "The Benettis are testing boundaries. They want to see if Vincent will fold, if he'll prioritize safety over loyalty. If he cuts you loose to protect you, word gets out that he's weak, that he can be manipulated." "This is insane," Elena said. "This is my life you're talking about like it's a chess game." "It is a chess game," Michael said quietly, "and you just became a piece on the board, whether you want to be or not. The question is, do you trust Vincent to keep you safe?" Elena looked at Vincent. He turned from the window, and the expression on his face was something between determination and fury. "I've kept these kids safe for years," he said. "Some of them have had prices on their heads. Some of them were targets of rival families or cops or their own demons. I've protected every single one of them, Elena. I'll protect you too." "How?" "Marco drives you to and from work, starting tomorrow. You don't take the subway alone. You don't walk anywhere alone. If I can't be with you, someone from the family is." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "I know you value your independence. I know this feels like prison, but it's temporary. Until we handle the Benetti situation." "Handle it how?" "Better you don't know the details." Eleanor thought about walking away, about returning to her safe, controlled life where the biggest risk was a failed restoration or a difficult client, about leaving this complicated, dangerous world behind. But she thought about Anthony's gratitude, about Sophia's nervous smile turning confident, about the way Tommy had called her family without hesitation. She thought about Vincent's steady presence, about feeling needed and useful, and part of something larger than herself. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, but I want to know what's happening. No keeping me in the dark to protect me. If I'm in danger, I deserve to know why and how bad it is." Vincent studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair. The Benettis have been moving into our territory for months. Small things at first. Protection rackets, gambling operations. But they're getting bolder. They hit one of our warehouses last week, stole merchandise, sent a message that they're not afraid of us. What do you want?" Eleanor asked. Our territory back, respect. But more than that, I want them to understand that my family is off limits, that there are lines you don't cross. His voice was ice. They crossed one tonight. So what happens now? Now we respond. Carefully, strategically, and we keep you safe while we do it. Vincent moved closer. Eleanor, I need to know you understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't a movie. This is real danger, real violence. If you want out, now is the time. Elena thought about the medical records, about Jason's rejection, about the empty apartment and the future that wasn't coming. She thought about the Madonna she was restoring, about bringing beauty back from damage and neglect. I'm not leaving, she said. I'm part of this family now. You said so yourself. And families don't abandon each other when things get hard. Something flickered in Vincent's expression. Relief, gratitude, something deeper. Then we keep you safe. All of us. Together. Danny stood, cracking his knuckles. I can take first watch tonight. Make sure the house is secure. I'll reach out to our contacts in the Benetti organization, Michael added. See if anyone's willing to talk to give us intel on their next move. And I'll coordinate with Sal and the others, Vincent said. Make sure everyone knows Elena is under our protection, that anyone who touches her answers to me. This is crazy, Elena whispered, but she was smiling, tears pricking at her eyes. You're all crazy. Probably, Tommy agreed cheerfully. But we're crazy together. That's what makes it work. That night, Elena stayed in one of Vincent's guest rooms. It felt strange to sleep in his house, to hear the sounds of Marco making rounds outside, to know that Danny was downstairs with a gun making sure no one approached the property. She couldn't sleep. Around midnight she gave up and padded downstairs in borrowed pajamas, finding Vincent in his study, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring at surveillance footage on his computer. Can't sleep either, she asked from the doorway. Too much to think about. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. Come in. Eleanor settled into the leather chair, curling her feet under her. The study felt different at night, more intimate, shadows pooling in corners, the city lights visible through the windows. I've been thinking about what you said, Vincent began, about family being what we build, and I realized I never told you why I really hired you. I thought it was because of the paintings, partly, but also because when I saw you in that cafe, you looked like I felt when Angela died, like someone who'd lost the future they'd imagined and didn't know how to build a new one. And I thought, he paused, taking a sip of whiskey, I thought maybe helping you restore those paintings would help you restore yourself. That's incredibly presumptuous. I know, but was I wrong? Elena thought about the past month, about finding purpose in the careful work of restoration, about the kids who looked at her with admiration and curiosity, about feeling needed, useful, part of something meaningful. No, she admitted, you weren't wrong. I've spent 20 years building this family, Vincent said quietly, taking in kids who needed guidance, who needed to belong to something. I thought it was enough, but then you walked into my life and I realized I'd been missing something. Not a mother for these kids. They don't need that, they're mostly grown. But someone who understood loss, who understood that beauty can survive damage, who could teach them that strength comes in different forms. You're giving me too much credit. Am I? Tommy's reading art history books. Danny talks about going back to school, maybe studying art conservation. Even Anthony, who's been in trouble since he was 12, asked me yesterday if he could watch you work sometime. You've changed things here, Elena. Changed them for the better. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. I just showed them some paintings. You showed them possibility, options, that there's more to life than the narrow paths they thought were available. Vincent set down his glass and leaned forward. I told you family is what we build, but I'm realizing that family is also who we choose, who we let in, who we trust with our broken pieces. Are you saying? I'm saying I'm glad you're here, that you stayed, that you chose this messy, complicated, dangerous family over the safe option of walking away. His eyes held hers. I'm saying you belong here, Elena, if you want to. I want to, she whispered. More than I thought possible. They sat in silence for a moment, something unspoken hanging between them. Eleanor felt it, the shift from friendship to something deeper, more complicated. The recognition that they'd both been lonely for so long, they'd forgotten what connection felt like. Vincent stood abruptly. You should get some rest. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to handle the Benetti situation. It's going to be a long few weeks. Elena stood too, moving toward the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at him. Vincent? Yes? Thank you. For seeing me, for understanding, for... She swallowed hard. For making me feel like I'm not broken. You were never broken, Elena. Just waiting for the right family to help you heal. As she climbed the stairs to the guest room, Eleanor heard Vincent return to his surveillance footage, heard the click of his keyboard, the quiet efficiency of a man protecting everything he'd built. She fell asleep thinking about restoration, about how the most damaged painting sometimes revealed the most beautiful underpainting, about how sometimes you had to remove layers of damage to discover what had been there all along. Outside in the cold November night, men watched the house, the Bonetti family's surveillance team cataloguing everyone who entered and left, building dossiers, planning their next move. But inside, surrounded by warmth and family and the fierce protection of people who'd chosen to love each other, Elena slept peacefully for the first time in months. The storm was coming, but she wouldn't face it alone. The escalation happened fast. On Monday, one of Vincent's legitimate businesses, a restaurant in Little Italy, was vandalized. Windows smashed, walls spray-painted with threats in Italian that Elena didn't understand, but that made Vincent's expression turn to stone. On Wednesday, Michael was jumped outside his apartment. He fought off 3 men but ended up with cracked ribs and a concussion. Elena visited him in the hospital, held his hand while he joked that he looked worse than the other guys, and felt rage building in her chest. On Friday, someone tried to run Danny off the road. He escaped unharmed but shaken, and that evening, Vincent called a family meeting that felt more like a war council. "They're testing us," Vincent said, pacing his study while everyone gathered, "seeing how far they can push before we respond. It's time to push back." "How?" Tommy asked. His usual cheerfulness was gone, replaced by cold anger. "We hit their operations, nothing violent. I don't want a war, but we make it clear that we're not passive targets. We have leverage, and we'll use it." Vincent turned to Marco. "You still have contacts in their supply chain?" "Yeah, I can disrupt their shipments, cost them money, hit them where it hurts." "Do it. Danny, I want you and Michael to reach out to the families that are neutral in this conflict. Make it clear that the Bonettis are causing instability, that they're bad for business overall. Build alliances." "What about Elena?" Anthony asked quietly. "They showed they're willing to target her. What's the plan to keep her safe?" Vincent's expression softened when he looked at her. "Elena stays here, full-time until this is resolved. I've already converted another room into a temporary studio. You can work on the paintings here. Never have to leave the property." "I have an apartment," Elena protested. "A life. I can't just disappear." "You can, and you will." Vincent's tone brooked no argument. "This isn't negotiable, Elena. The Bonettis have made you a target. The safest place for you is here, surrounded by family, with security we control. For how long? Until it's over. Days, weeks. I don't know. But I won't risk you." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist on her independence, her right to make her own choices, but she looked around the room at these people who'd become her family, at Michael with his bandaged ribs, at Danny's haunted expression, at Tommy's clenched fists, and realized they were all in danger because of her presence in their lives. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll stay. But I want to help. Whatever you need, research, planning, I don't care. I'm not just hiding while everyone else takes risks." Vincent looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, we use everyone's strengths. Yours is attention to detail, pattern recognition. You can help us analyze the Bonetti operations, find weaknesses we might have missed." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity and tension. Elena moved into Vincent's house completely, her apartment subletted to a friend from the Met. She worked on the paintings during the day and helped strategize at night, poring over spreadsheets and surveillance photos, mapping out the Bonetti family's business operations. She discovered she was good at it. The same skills that helped her authenticate paintings, attention to subtle details, pattern recognition, logical analysis, translated surprisingly well to understanding criminal enterprises. "Here," she said one evening, pointing to a series of transactions. "They're using this trucking company as a front, but look at the timing. 3 shipments every Tuesday and Friday, always to the same addresses. It's too regular, too predictable." Vincent leaned over her shoulder, studying the documents. "You're right. Marco, Can we intercept one of these shipments? Easily. They're not expecting anyone to have this level of detail. Then we do it. This Tuesday. We don't steal anything. Just delay it. Make it clear we can reach their operations whenever we want. Let them know they're not untouchable. The plan went smoothly. The Benetti shipment was delayed by 8 hours due to a mechanical failure that was anything but mechanical. Word spread quickly through the underground networks. Vincent Romano was striking back, and he was being smart about it. The Benettis responded with restraint, which worried Elena more than aggression would have. "They're planning something," she told Vincent one night. "This is too quiet." "I know. We're being careful. Extra security. No one goes anywhere alone." But careful wasn't enough. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-December. Elena was working on the Bronzino, carefully removing the last layer of damaged varnish, when she heard shouting from downstairs. Then gunshots, sharp, unmistakable cracks that made her drop her tools. She ran to the window. 3 cars had pulled up outside, men emerging with weapons. This wasn't a subtle warning. This was an assault. Elena's phone rang. "Vincent," his voice tense. "Elena, listen carefully. There's a safe room on the 3rd floor behind the bookshelf in my bedroom. The panel with the complete Shakespeare. Press the spine of Hamlet. Get inside and don't come out until I come for you personally. Do you understand? What about you? Do you understand?" Yes, I understand." "Good. I love—" He stopped, catching himself. "Stay safe, Elena. We'll handle this." More gunshots. Elena ran to Vincent's bedroom, found the bookshelf, pressed the spine of Hamlet with shaking hands. The panel swung open, revealing a small room with supplies, water, a charged phone, and, she noticed with grim appreciation, a gun with instructions taped to the wall. She sealed herself inside and waited. The next hour was the longest of Elena's life. She could hear sounds, shouting, breaking glass, the percussion of violence that she tried not to imagine too clearly. She clutched her phone, watching it like a lifeline. Finally, after what felt like days, a text from Vincent. "Coming to get you. I'll knock 3 times, then twice. Don't open for anyone else." The knock came. 3 times. A pause. Twice. Elena opened the panel. Vincent stood there, and her breath caught. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye, his shirt torn, his knuckles raw, but he was alive, and the relief that flooded through her was so intense she felt dizzy. "It's over," he said. They retreated. "Everyone's okay, bruised, shaken, but okay." Elena threw her arms around him without thinking. He stiffened for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding, could smell gun smoke and sweat and the cologne he always wore. "I was terrified," she whispered against his shoulder. "I thought—" "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His voice was rough, breaking on the edges. "This is my fault. I brought you into this world and now—" "Stop!" Elena pulled back enough to look at him. "I chose this. I chose to stay. I chose this family. Don't take that choice away from me by blaming yourself." Something in Vincent's expression cracked. He cupped her face with his damaged hands, his thumbs gentle against her cheeks. "Elena—" Whatever he was going to say was interrupted by Danny's voice from the hallway. "Vincent, the Benettis sent a messenger. They want to negotiate." Vincent closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them, the vulnerable man was gone, replaced by the Mafia boss who'd built an empire on strength and strategy. "We'll talk later," he told Elena. "Right now, I need to end this. Permanently." The negotiation happened that evening in neutral territory, a warehouse owned by a third party who had connections to both families. Vincent brought Danny, Michael, and Sal. The Benettis brought equivalent numbers. Elena watched via video feed from Vincent's study, Marco beside her providing commentary. "That's Carlo Benetti," Marco explained. "The old man's son. He's the one pushing for expansion, trying to prove himself." On screen, Vincent and Carlo faced each other across a table. Even through the grainy feed, Elena could see the tension. "You attacked my home," Vincent's voice came through the speakers. "You targeted my family. You crossed lines that should never be crossed. You've been blocking our expansion for months," Carlo shot back. "This territory is changing. Your generation's way of doing business is dying. We're the future. The future doesn't mean abandoning all rules. There's a reason we have boundaries, Carlo. A reason we don't target families, don't bring violence to residential areas. Once you cross those lines, there's no going back. You create chaos that hurts everyone. Maybe chaos is what we need. To shake things up, to take what we want instead of asking permission from dinosaurs who... Enough! The older Benetti, Carlo's father, spoke for the first time. My son is young and aggressive, but he's not wrong that territory is being contested. What do you propose, Vincent? Vincent pulled out a document. A division of territory. Clear boundaries. You get the expansion you want in areas we're willing to cede. In return, you leave my operations and my family alone completely forever. And if we refuse, then we go to war. Real war. Not this testing and posturing, and I promise you, Luca, when it's over, there won't be a Benetti operation left standing. I've built this empire over 20 years. I have connections, resources, and leverage you can't imagine. More importantly, I have nothing left to lose. Vincent leaned forward. Your son made this personal when he targeted Elena Martinez. When you make things personal with me, I don't negotiate. I eliminate threats completely. The room fell silent. Elena watched Carlo's face turn red, watched Luca Benetti study Vincent with calculating eyes. You'd start a war over one woman, Carlo scoffed. I'd start a war over any member of my family, Vincent said quietly. That's what you don't understand, Carlo. That's why your generation will fail. You see people as assets, as leverage. I see them as family. And I protect family with everything I have. Luca Benetti stood, pulling his son up with him. We'll consider your proposal. You'll have our answer in 48 hours. You have 24, Vincent countered. After that, my offer expires, and we handle this my way. The Benettis agreed to the terms 23 hours later. Signed documents, witnessed by neutral parties, dividing territory and establishing clear boundaries. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was peace. Uneasy, conditional peace, but peace nonetheless. That night, Vincent's family celebrated in the way they knew best, with a massive dinner, loud music, and the kind of chaotic joy that only comes after surviving real danger. Eleanor found Vincent on the roof around midnight. He stood at the edge, looking out over Queens, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and exhaustion written in every line of his body. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." He didn't turn, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. Some celebration. You earned it. You protected everyone. Almost everyone. Michael's still healing. Danny has nightmares. You had to hide in a safe room while people with guns tried to kill us. His voice was bitter. Not much to celebrate. Eleanor moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Everyone's alive. Everyone's safe now. That's worth celebrating. Is it? Look at what I've built, Elena. Violence and territory disputes and children who grow up thinking this is normal. What kind of legacy is that? A complicated one, she said honestly, but also one where kids who had nothing found family, where Tommy got a second chance, where Anthony learned he could be more than his mistakes, where Danny and Michael and all the others found belonging and purpose and love. She turned to face him. You're not perfect, Vincent. This world isn't perfect. But what you've built, this family, it saved lives, changed lives, that matters. He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything he'd been holding back. Fear and relief and gratitude and something deeper, more complicated. When I thought they might hurt you, he said quietly. When I heard those gunshots and knew you were in the house, I realized something. I've spent 20 years building walls around my heart, telling myself that caring too much was dangerous. That love was vulnerability. But Elena, his voice broke. You broke through every wall I had, and I'm terrified of what that means. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. What does it mean? It means I'm in love with you. Completely, irrationally in love with you. He laughed, sharp and pained. I know it's insane. We've known each other for 2 months. You came here to restore paintings, not to get caught up in mob violence, and... Eleanor kissed him. She'd never been the one to make the first move before, had always waited, uncertain, worried about rejection, but standing on that rooftop with this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man, she knew with absolute certainty what she wanted. Vincent froze for a heartbeat, then kissed her back with an intensity that stole her breath. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their raw knuckles, and she tasted whiskey and desperation and hope on his lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent pressed his forehead against hers. This is crazy, he whispered. Completely, Eleanor agreed. But I don't care. I spent so long mourning what I couldn't have that I forgot to look at what was right in front of me. You, Vincent, this family, this life. It's different from what I imagined, but it's real and it's mine, and I choose it. Even knowing what it means? The danger, the complications, the fact that my world will never be completely safe. Even knowing all of that. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You told me family is what we build, so let's build this. Together. Not perfectly, not without problems, but together. Vincent kissed her again, softer this time, sweet and full of promise. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I told you that first night that I had enough kids for both of us. I meant it. I can't give you the conventional family, the white picket fence, the biological children, but I can give you this. Messy, loud, dangerous, but real. Is that enough? Elena thought about the past 2 months, about Tommy bringing her art books and Anthony asking if he could watch her work, about Sophia becoming her friend and Maria treating her like a daughter, about the restoration work that gave her purpose and the family dinners that gave her belonging. She thought about the Madonna she was restoring, bringing beauty back from damage, about how sometimes the most valuable things were the ones you had to fight to preserve. It's more than enough, she said. It's everything. 1 year later, the gallery opening was Eleanor's idea, but it became a family affair. Vincent's townhouse transformed for one evening into a private gallery showcasing his restored collection. The Madonna hung in the place of honor, her face serene and luminous under carefully positioned lights. The martyrdom scene occupied an entire wall, its violent beauty now fully revealed. The Bronzino, authenticated, documented, and permanently part of Vincent's private collection, drew gasps from every visitor. But there were new pieces too. Paintings that Elena had acquired and restored over the past year, building Vincent's collection with the same care she'd used to build their relationship. Each piece had a story, a history, a journey from damage to beauty that resonated with everyone who saw it. The guest list was carefully curated. Art students from local universities, museum professionals, historians. Some of them undoubtedly wondered about Vincent Romano and his connections, but the art spoke for itself. Beauty transcended circumstances. Elena stood beside the Bronzino, explaining the restoration process to a group of rapt art students when she felt Vincent's hand settle on the small of her back. "You're a natural teacher," he murmured. "I learned from the best. Maria says you used to do this. Bring the kids to museums, teach them to look at art properly." A long time ago. Before I got too paranoid about public exposure. He smiled, watching the students examine the painting with genuine fascination. This was a good idea. Sharing this. Art shouldn't be hoarded. It should be experienced, discussed, loved. She leaned into him slightly. Kind of like family. Across the room, Tommy was explaining paintbrush techniques to Sophia, who was now his fiancée. Danny had brought his art conservation professor from NYU, hoping to get advice on his thesis. Michael stood with Maria, the two of them arguing cheerfully about whether the Madonna was Venetian or Florentine in origin. Anthony, now 18 and enrolled in community college, was showing his girlfriend, a quiet girl who wanted to be a teacher, the martyrdom scene. Elena saved this, he was saying, his voice full of pride. It was almost destroyed, but she brought it back, made it beautiful again. Marco and Lucia had brought their 3-month-old daughter, who was passed around like a precious treasure. When the baby ended up in Elena's arms, she felt the old pang, but softer now, more like remembering old pain than experiencing new hurt. "You're good with her," Lucia said warmly. "Maybe someday you and Vincent—" "Maybe," Elena said, non-committal. She and Vincent had talked about adoption, about fostering, about the many ways to build a family beyond biology. They hadn't decided anything yet, but the conversations no longer felt painful. They felt like possibilities. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Elena found herself in the restoration room, now a permanent fixture of the house. New paintings waited for her attention. A damaged Titian, a water-stained Tintoretto, a cracked and fading Caravaggio sketch. "Still working?" Vincent appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. "Just planning. The Titian needs work on the support structure before I can even start on the paint layer. It's going to be a 6-month project at least." "Good thing you're not going anywhere." He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. That was a successful evening. 3 students asked about internships. 2 professors want to collaborate on research. Even that stuffy curator from the Brooklyn Museum admitted your restoration work was exemplary. Told you this would work. They stood in comfortable silence, looking at the paintings waiting to be restored. Each one was a promise of patient work, of beauty revealed, of taking broken things and making them whole again. "I have something for you," Vincent said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Eleanor's heart stuttered. "Vincent, it's not what you think. Or maybe it is. I don't know the rules for this." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "I'm not good at conventional romance, Elena. I can't promise you safety or normalcy or any of the things a normal man could offer, but I can promise you this family, this life, these kids who look up to you, this work that matters, and me, every complicated, damaged part of me, if you want it." Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him. A year ago, she'd been sitting in a cafe mourning a future that would never exist. Now she stood in a restoration studio, surrounded by art and family and possibility, and the future looked nothing like what she'd imagined. It looked better. "I want it," she said. "All of it. You, this family, this ridiculous, complicated, beautiful life we're building." Vincent kissed her, gentle and thorough, and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like everything else in this unexpected life they'd created together. "So that's a yes?" he asked against her lips. "That's a yes to everything." Outside, the December night was cold and clear. Inside Vincent Romano's townhouse in Queens, a family celebrated. Not a conventional family, nothing about them was conventional, but they were real and fierce and bound together by choice rather than blood. And sometimes, Eleanor had learned, the families we choose are the ones that save us, the ones that teach us that broken things can be made beautiful again. That damage isn't destiny. That love comes in unexpected forms, from unexpected places, and transforms us in ways we never imagined possible. She'd come here to restore paintings. Instead, she'd restored herself, and in doing so, had helped restore everyone around her. The Madonna watched from the gallery, her serene face a testament to survival and beauty, and the patient work of hands that refused to let art die. Elena looked at her creation, at the painting she'd saved from destruction, and saw herself reflected back. Damaged, yes. Restored, definitely. But most importantly, whole. "Come on," Vincent said, taking her hand. "The family's waiting. Maria made tiramisu, and if we don't get down there, Tommy's going to eat the entire thing." Elena laughed, letting him lead her downstairs. Behind them, in the restoration room, paintings waited patiently for their turn at resurrection. There would always be more work to do, more beauty to save, more broken things to make whole. But tonight was for celebration, for family, for the life she'd chosen and the love she'd found in the most unexpected place. As she descended the stairs, Eleanor heard voices raised in laughter, heard the clatter of plates and the warm chaos of people who belonged to each other. She heard home, and she'd never been happier.